The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of Mboko forest as 17-year-old Kemi pressed deeper into its shadowed depths. Her younger brother Emeka had been missing for 3 days now, and despite the village elders' warnings, she refused to abandon him to whatever darkness claimed those who entered after dusk. "Foolish girl," her grandmother had muttered, clutching her weathered cowrie shells. "The forest keeps what it takes. Your brother walks with the spirits now." But Kemi had seen the fear in the old woman's eyes, not just concern for Emeka, but something deeper. Something that made her fingers tremble as she cast the shells again and again, each time gasping at what she saw. The air grew thick as Kemi moved between the ancient trees, their bark scarred with symbols she didn't recognize. Twisted roots erupted from the earth like gnarled fingers, and everywhere hung the sweet, sickening scent of decay masked by night-blooming jasmine. Her torch flickered weakly, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of the flame. She called Emeka's name, but the forest swallowed her voice completely. Even her footsteps on the carpet of dead leaves made no sound. It was as if Mboko forest existed in a bubble of absolute silence, where only the whispers could penetrate. They started as she reached a clearing where 7 baobab trees formed a perfect circle. At first, she thought it was wind rustling through branches, but there was no breeze. The leaves hung motionless as death. "Kemi," the voice was soft, almost loving. "Sweet Kemi, we've been waiting." She spun around, torch held high, but saw only darkness beyond the circle of flickering light. Her heart hammered against her ribs as more voices joined the first, creating a chorus of whispered longings. "Don't be afraid, child. Your brother is safe with us. So safe, so peaceful, so still. Come deeper, Kemi. Come where the old spirits dance." Against every instinct screaming at her to flee, Kemi stepped forward. She had to find Emeka. She had to bring him home. But as she crossed into the circle of baobabs, the whispers suddenly stopped. In the absolute silence, she heard something else, a low, rhythmic drumming that seemed to rise from the earth itself, the sound of a heartbeat, but not human. Too slow, too deep, too ancient. Her torch guttered and went out. In the darkness, she saw them. Dozens of pale figures moving between the trees, their forms shifting and translucent like moonlight on water. They danced in slow, hypnotic circles, and as her eyes adjusted, she realized with horror that some of the dancers wore the faces of people she knew, villagers who had vanished over the years. Her own cousin Adaiora, who had disappeared 5 summers ago. And there, in the center of the ghostly procession, was Emeka. But when he turned to look at her, his eyes were holes of absolute blackness, and his smile was too wide, revealing teeth that had grown sharp and numerous like a shark's. He raised one translucent hand and beckoned. "Sister," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Dance with us. Dance forever." The pale figures began moving toward her, their footsteps finally audible, a wet sliding sound like flesh on stone. Kemi opened her mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. The forest had stolen her voice, just as it had stolen everything else. As the spirits closed in, their whispers returned, now a deafening roar in her mind. "Stay, stay, stay." Kemi stumbled backward as the ghostly figures advanced, their faces shifting between human and something far more ancient. The drums beneath the earth grew louder, matching the frantic rhythm of her pulse. She fumbled in her pocket for the protective charm her grandmother had pressed into her palm, a small pouch of red earth and iron filings bound with white thread. "Emeka, please," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could still hear her. The thing wearing her brother's face tilted, its head studying her with those hollow black eyes. "He cannot answer," it said, its voice layered with harmonics that hurt her ears. "We are him now. He is us. As you will be." The other spirits began to circle her, their movements creating a wind that shouldn't exist in the airless forest. So they spun faster. Kemi caught glimpses of their true forms. Not human at all, but something like twisted trees given consciousness. Their limbs too long, their faces bark rough and moss-covered. "What do you want?" she managed to ask. The Emeka thing laughed, a sound like branches breaking. "Want? We want what all forgotten things want. To be remembered. To be fed. Your village once honored us with offerings, palm wine poured on our roots, cola nuts buried in our soil. But you have forgotten the old ways." More spirits emerged from between the trees. Kemi recognized some. The hunter who vanished last season. The young woman who went to gather herbs and never returned. But others were older, wearing clothing. From decades past, their forms more faded and terrible. "We hunger," they whispered in unison. "We hunger for the warmth of the living." The protective charm in Kemi's hand grew hot, then scorching. She dropped it with a cry, and immediately the spirits pressed closer. Their breath was cold fog that made her skin burn with frost. She could feel her life force being drawn from her, pulled toward their desperate need. But as her strength ebbed, she remembered her grandmother's other words, words spoken in the old language taught to her when she was small. A binding spell, used to trap malevolent spirits in objects or places. If she could remember it correctly. "Edo Gibi," she began, her voice cracking. The spirits hissed and drew back slightly. "Edo Gibi, aye mini." "Stop." The Emeka thing snarled, no longer bothering to maintain its human facade. Its form stretched and twisted, becoming something arachnid and horrible. "You know not what you speak." But Kemi continued the incantation, each word growing stronger. The spirits writhed as if in pain, their forms beginning to flicker and fade. The ancient drums faltered, their rhythm becoming irregular. "You cannot bind us all," one of the older spirits shrieked. "We are root and branch, earth and shadow. We are the forest itself." "Then to the forest you return," Kemi said, speaking the final words of the binding. "And from the forest you shall not stray until the debt is paid and the old pact renewed." Light exploded from the ground beneath her feet. Not the warm light of sun or fire, but something cold and blue, like starlight concentrated. The spirits screamed as one, their forms beginning to dissolve into mist and shadow. But as they faded, Kemi felt a terrible pull, as if something were trying to drag her soul from her body. The Emeka thing made one last desperate lunge toward her. "If we cannot have you willing," it hissed, "we will take you bound." Its ghostly fingers wrapped around her wrist, and immediately Kemi felt her vision blur. The forest began to spin around her, and she realized with horror that the binding spell was working both ways, trapping the spirits, but also trapping her with them. As consciousness slipped away, she heard her grandmother's voice echoing from memory. "Every binding requires an anchor, child. Something to hold the spell in place. Something alive." The last thing Kemi saw before darkness claimed her was the terrible understanding in the Emeka thing's black eyes and its almost human smile of victory. Kemi awoke to pain, not physical, but something deeper, as if her soul had been stretched and pinned down like a butterfly in a collector's case. She lay on the forest floor, but everything around her had changed. The trees were taller, their branches forming a canopy so thick that no natural light penetrated. The very air seemed to pulse with malevolent life. She was still in Mboko forest, but now she was part of it. "The binding holds," said a voice beside her. She turned to see an elderly woman sitting on a throne made of intertwined roots, her skin bark rough and her hair adorned with leaves and small bones. This was no spirit like the others. This was something far older, something that had never been human. "Who are you?" Kemi asked, surprised that her voice worked again. "I am the heart of the forest," the creature replied. "I am what you call Mboko, though that is not my true name. Your ancestor mothers knew me well, before iron came to the land and the old ways were forgotten. The spirit Emeka materialized beside the throne, but now he looked different, more solid, more real. "Sister," he said, and his voice was purely human again. "I'm sorry. I tried to warn you away, but she wouldn't let me." "The binding was clever," Mboko continued, her ancient eyes studying Kemi with something like approval. "Your grandmother taught you well, but incomplete. You trapped my children, yes, but without understanding the true nature of the spell. A binding must have an anchor, something to hold it in place. You have become that anchor." Kemi struggled to sit up and found that root-like tendrils had grown from the ground to wrap around her ankles and wrists. Not restraints, she realized with growing horror, but connections. She was becoming part of the forest's root system, a living conduit for the binding spell. "Let my brother go," she said. "Take me instead." Mboko laughed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Child, I have you both, but your brother, he came to me willingly in the end. He sought to protect your village from my hunger. He offered himself as tribute, thinking it would satisfy me. But spirits grow hungry again, and one life, even freely given, lasts only so long. Then what do you want from me? What I have always wanted, what my kind has always needed: recognition, respect, the old compact between forest and village." Mboko gestured, and the air shimmered to show images of the past, villagers leaving offerings at the forest's edge, dancers performing rituals beneath the baobab trees, hunters asking permission before taking game. "Your people have forgotten us," she continued. "They clear the forests without ceremony, take without asking, live without acknowledging the spirits that share their world. We are fading. And when we fade, we become hungry, desperate." Kemi felt the root tendrils tightening around her limbs, not painful but insistent, like a parent's grip on a child's hand. "But you're not fading," she said. "You're stronger than ever. Because I feed on your kind now, instead of receiving proper offerings. Blood and life force instead of palm wine and respect. But such feeding comes with a cost: madness, corruption, endless hunger that can never be satisfied." The spirit Emeka knelt beside his sister. "She's offering us a choice, Kemi. We can restore the old ways, become mediators between village and forest. Or we can remain as we are, trapped, serving as anchors for a binding that grows weaker each day. And if the binding fails?" Mboko's smile was terrible. "Then my children and I will be free to feed as we choose. Your village will be empty within a moon's turning." Kemi closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. She could sense the other spirits around them, not just the recent dead, but older ones, spirits of tree and stream and stone that had once been honored, now twisted by neglect and hunger. They weren't evil, she realized. They were starving. "I agree," she said carefully. "What happens to us? To the people who are already bound?" "You become my priestess," Mboko replied. "A bridge between worlds. Your brother will be my guardian, protecting the sacred spaces. The others who serve me will find peace, their hunger satisfied, their purpose restored, and your village will be safe as long as the compact is honored." "And if they forget again?" The ancient spirit's eyes grew cold. "Then the binding returns, and next time, I will choose a stronger anchor, perhaps your entire village." As if summoned by their conversation, Kemi heard voices calling her name from the forest's edge. The search party had finally worked up the courage to enter Mboko's domain. "Choose quickly," Mboko whispered. before fear makes them do something foolish. The voices grew closer. Kemi's grandmother leading the search party, along with her father and several of the village elders. Their torches flickered weakly in the supernatural darkness of the forest's heart, and she could hear their prayers and protective chants growing more desperate with each step. "They're afraid," Emeka observed, his spirit form shimmering with newfound clarity. "But they came anyway. For you." Kemi felt the root tendrils around her limbs pulse with life, and understood that this was her last chance to choose. Once her people saw her bound to the forest's spirit, there would be no going back for any of them. "If I accept," she said to Mboko, "how do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know you won't simply take more and more until there's nothing left?" The ancient spirit's bark-rough features softened slightly. "Because, child, a true compact binds both parties. I will be as held by the agreement as your people. Should I break faith, should I take more than is offered, the binding will turn upon me, and I will fade as surely as if I had never fed at all." "Kemi!" Her grandmother's voice echoed through the trees, much closer now. "Kemi, where are you?" "Here," Kemi called back, making her decision. "I'm here, grandmother, and I'm safe." She felt Mboko's approval, like warmth spreading through her bones. The root tendrils loosened but didn't disappear entirely. They transformed, becoming decorative bands of living wood around her wrists and ankles, marking her new role as intermediary between worlds. The search party burst into the clearing, torches held high, charms and protective amulets clutched in trembling hands. Kemi's father raised his hunting spear when he saw her sitting beside the throne of roots, but her grandmother stayed his hand. "She has been chosen," the old woman said quietly, her eyes taking in the scene with the wisdom of one who remembered the older stories. "Haven't you, child?" "Yes," Kemi replied, rising gracefully to her feet. The forest spirits materialized. Around them, no longer the terrifying wraiths of before, but beings of dignity and ancient power. Emeka appeared among them, solid and whole, though clearly no longer entirely human. "The compact must be renewed," Kemi announced, her voice carrying new authority. "Mboko Forest is not cursed. It is sacred. The spirits here are not evil. They are forgotten. They hunger because they have been ignored, not because they are malevolent." Her father stepped forward, confusion and fear warring in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that our ancestors knew how to live in harmony with the forest spirits. They left offerings, performed rituals, asked permission before taking. We have forgotten these ways, and the spirits have grown desperate in their neglect." Mboko rose from her throne, towering over the assembled humans. But instead of menace, she radiated a kind of terrible dignity. "Your daughter speaks truth. I offer a choice: return to the old ways, honor the compact between your people and mine, or face the consequences of our hunger." The village elders whispered among themselves, their faces pale in the torchlight. Finally, Kemi's grandmother stepped forward and bowed deeply to the forest spirit. "What do you require of us?" "Monthly offerings at the forest's edge," Mboko replied. "Palm wine, cola nuts, red earth from your fields, recognition of the sacred groves, no cutting, no hunting in the places of power. And this: your daughter will serve as priestess, maintaining the balance between our worlds. And in return, protection for your village, guidance for your hunters, healing herbs freely given, and no more of your children will vanish into my domain." The negotiation continued through the night, with Kemi translating between the two worlds she now straddled. By dawn, the new compact was sealed, not with blood, as in the old stories, but with understanding. The village would honor the forest spirits as their ancestors had done, and the spirits would return to their role as guardians rather than predators. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy, the supernatural darkness began to lift. The forest was still ancient and mysterious, but no longer actively malevolent. The spirits faded into their trees and streams, satisfied at last. Emeka approached his sister one final time. "Will you be happy?" he asked. Kemi looked around at the forest that was now her home, feeling the pulse of life in every root and branch. "I think so," she said. "And you?" He smiled, fully human, again in that moment. "I think we've found our purpose. Both of us." The village elders departed, carrying word of the new compact back to their people. But Kemi remained, taking up her role as guardian of the ancient ways. And in the years that followed, Mboko Forest became known not as a place of terror, but as a sanctuary, a reminder that some old things should never be forgotten. The whispers still echo through the trees at dusk, but now they speak of welcome rather than hunger, of balance rather than desperation. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear them teaching the old songs to those wise enough to learn them once again.